Hello and welcome to the Churros y Tácticas Podcast. This is your host, Kiyan Sobhani. It is Tuesday, December 29th. We're recording on a Tuesday. And I have crawling out of my cave. I'm just peeking. Like yesterday, I peeked out, published a column, watched a football game. Today, I'm starting to really come out of the cave, getting some sunlight, getting some vitamin D, and trying to come out of my churros coma. And hydrate and socialize with people in the podcasting world. And so that's why it's Churros on a Tuesday on December 29th with Diego Lorijn. Diego, how you doing, man?
I'm good, my friend. I'm good. I was just saying that I'm trying to keep warm. We just had a lengthy conversation with regards to, Spanish living, Canadian living, the cost thereof. We realized it would have been good content, interesting content for our listeners, most of which are internationally based and might be interested in making a move to Spain. Just talking about, I guess how surprisingly high things like gas and electricity and water are over here, but how the social healthcare system is, I think, up to scratch with, I would say, up to par, let's say, with some of the best in the world, especially when you compare cost to quality, right? What you get in return for your taxpayer money. Anyway, why am I rehashing this stuff? I don't know. I'm doing good, I guess what I'm trying to say. Happy to be here. A little bit cold, but hey, here we are for another day with some churros. A jam-packed bag of very delicious, sugary, greasy churros, crispy, may I add, because thanks to many of our patrons and listeners, we received some highly interesting questions for which, I can't wait to dig into.
Well, if anyone who was trying to decide between Canada and Spain as a destination to live after the pandemic was over, they would have gotten their answer in our off-air discussion, but unfortunately, now they're just going to have to move blindly. They're just going to have to pick one, throw darts at the wall, and or spin the globe and point their finger, and that's it. They won't have our insight anymore.
Yeah. That's it.
So, patron questions. We have a lot because we put out a call for questions. And there wasn't actual football to talk about, right? I mean, there was anything that actually happened football-related in terms of games that, anyway.
You would have discussed on the Managing Madrid.
Well, since our live podcast on YouTube, we had the Granada game. So, we've already discussed our Managing Madrid. And then there was Premier League games and stuff like that. Some Serie A games midweek, but they are irrelevant here. So we put out a call for questions. And since then, maybe the only bit of news to talk about is Diego Costa and Atletico mutually parting ways. Diego Costa due to family reasons. Kieran Trippier's football ban, which seems ridiculous on the surface, and the third one, which is like kind of news but kind of not, is the Isco link to Sevilla, which I don't think is concrete enough to actually discuss at this juncture in time. So I say we dive into the questions, Diego, and whatever rises naturally, and then we'll just go through it. All right. Our Patreon, by the way, patreon.com/Churros y Tácticas is where you go to pledge, get guaranteed responses to your questions. If you didn't even know that you could submit questions, well, that's because you're not a patron. So get on that train. Our patron, Luis Berga, says, "Hey guys, there are two major trends that I see changing the game right now. One is the shift from tiki-taka to heavy metal pressing, and the other is the embrace of data analytics. Personally, I think Spain is falling behind in both areas. My big complaint about Spanish soccer is that they produce great players, but not great athletes, which it seems is what is needed in the modern game. And I don't hear or see much tactical innovation in La Liga. If anything, they're going backwards with the old guard of Pellegrini and Emery coming back, as opposed to embracing new ideas, perhaps driven by data. Do you guys agree or disagree? And how do you see Spanish clubs in La Liga adapting to the changing game?"
Well, I mean, this was definitely, one of the most interesting questions that I had to kind of sit back and ponder on and imagine, you being the tácticas, generally speaking, I think that's not an overstatement. The tácticas part of this, let's say tácticas anchor of this program. I want to know your thoughts on this before I kind of, let it rip, or not really let it rip, but just I guess, provide my 2 cents to this conversation.
All right. Well, I agree and I disagree. But I actually mostly disagree. So the thing with let's start with very quickly out of the way that producing great players and not great athletes. I'm not entirely sure what that means, because to me, you don't. Athletes are just born. They're just freak athletes are just born. They're naturally gifted. They have physical gifts. They have good genes. And sure, you groom their athletic ability. You have fitness regimes. You have fitness training programs. But, freak athletes can just be born anywhere. It doesn't really matter. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo was born in Portugal. Sergio Ramos was born in Spain. Adama Traore was born in Spain. So, these things, to me, these people are just kind of born the way they are. Zion Williamson is born in the United States. Who else? If you listen to what's that former Real Madrid youth team, Alvaro Benito manager, I think he was saying today or yesterday that Luka Modric is actually kind of that fits that mold, and what he's doing, he's an exceptional athlete. So to me, that part of it, that side of things, the athletic ability side of things, is a separate discussion, and I don't think needs to be intertwined in this, and that one country is behind or ahead. I think we can talk about fitness regime and the science behind it, which I don't think Spain is behind in, to be honest. I also think with regards to tactical innovation in La Liga, are they going backwards? So this is also this question, I think, has layers.
Yeah, and
so many layers, and also I think as fans, the perception is different than what is actually happening behind the scenes, right? So if you talk to scouts and if you talk to some of the people behind the scenes working for La Liga clubs, they will tell you what they use, the data they use, the driven, the film, the video, the analytics and stuff. La Liga recently released that app, which is, I'm trying to remember the name. I think it was called Sandbox or something, where it basically it's a data driven platform that helps every team. It democratizes the analytics for every La Liga team, that they have access to it. Everything from player positioning with any game they wanted to underlying analytics and numbers. All of that stuff La Liga teams use. They're not behind in this. I also think there's an interesting, to me, it's not that teams don't all have access or are using the same kind of analytical approach. Sure, I think some clubs will use it more, and funny enough, that I think that the teams that are a bit smaller will tend to use that data a little bit more, mostly because they have less resources to go buy, superstars. So they invest a lot in their scouting departments, keeping an eye on certain players, and even then, by the way, when you get to that level, it doesn't really matter what the analytics say, right? So I remember there was a piece in Forbes a couple years ago about this, but there are a lot of Premier League teams, even the championship level teams, they are using numbers to scout players. But the thing is, when you use numbers to scout players, it doesn't really tell you anything. So what the hell does it mean to us in the Premier League if a player in the Eredivisie commits 5 tackles per game? Okay, well, that doesn't mean anything to us, right? So a lot of this stuff, because the sample size is small, the scouting of the actual real scouting, seeing these players play in flesh, becomes more important, investing at that level. But I also think, money is a thing, right? With the Premier League, we can mention La Liga and the coaches who are coming back. By the way, Emery, I actually think, is a little bit underrated in this respect. A lot of his insight. A lot of his insight is very much tactical, kind of player positioning and kind of using different metrics and analytics to play a certain way. And again, we don't see a lot of this stuff in front of us and then I would also say that it's kind of hard to answer this question because managers can also change.
Yeah.
I would have said somebody like Jose Mourinho was extremely outdated. This question mentions Mauricio Pellegrini, which I would actually agree to a certain extent. And I think his football worked for a certain time and a certain era and a certain group of players. So I don't know if necessarily he can replicate what he did with Villarreal back in the day. But But I put Mourinho in the bin of like, dude, you have to evolve. Otherwise, like you just been playing this way, a certain way for years and years. Every year it doesn't work more and more, and teams have just scattered it. And so like this year is kind of like the year I feel like he's kind of, I don't know if he's necessarily revolutionized the way he views football, but he's certainly very data driven. He's certainly very analytics.
Like crazy, huh?
Yeah, he is. So when we talk about,
and he was at Madrid as well, though.
Yeah, he was. He always was. And I think, so there will be different cycles to
Probably
this.
Because he wasn't a player.
Well, that's an interesting side of it too. Yeah, that's a very interesting side of it.
He had more of a Moneyball approach. Like for those that watch the movie, where this
is that a football or baseball? Which one is that?
It's baseball, actually. Who was it? Brad Pitt? I think it was Brad Pitt, right? Was it Brad Pitt or was it that dude with the Texas accent?
It's Brad Pitt.
No, it was Brad Pitt. Yeah. And he basically, he's the coach. Let's say he's the tactical brain behind the Oakland A's, right? The new team to kind of regenerate this championship caliber team. But he does a large part of that by assembling the players through basically statistics. That's really where the introduction of statistics in sports, what happened through, that's a real story. So it happened through that Moneyball concept where they started to scout players based on numbers as opposed to, kind of more personality or character traits, like stylistic traits of players.
The Daryl Morey approach too.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, it was very superficial in that sense. Kind of more like, that player he's a good character. Like he has a lot of personality. He's an optimistic guy, or he's a strong guy. And then sort of here comes along this other guy that says, well, how fast does he pitch? How many hits does he get, etc. I'm not going to get into the details or specifics of baseball because I'm absolutely fucking useless. I know nothing about it. Home run, that's as far as it goes. But in any case, it sounds like, from what I think we know from Mourinho, that his approach was much more, like you said, right, on statistics and everything. So sorry, I jumped in there with this blurring this out. I don't know the point that you were trying to make.
Well, so with Mourinho too, I mean, it's a statistic to call it even that is a little bit of a disservice to him because I mean, even when you hear him speak, and especially when he was on TV, just kind of talking about players' positioning and like where this player needs to be and where he's not, etc. That was very interesting.
Overly simplifying his approach for sure. Yeah.
But I think you bring up a great point. Just the fact of the player versus non-player kind of dynamic is very interesting to me, and it totally has always. I've never been the kind of person to believe that, this player has won this much as a player. He's one of the best players of all time. Just trust what he's doing. I've never bought into that philosophy, and it kind of holds true when you kind of look at what Mourinho and Klopp have done, and what on the flip side, what somebody like Maradona has done, right? And so I'm not saying it's necessarily correlated. I'm just saying that it doesn't really matter in that sense, and it can kind of go either way with that kind of stuff. Nagelsmann is another one who is extremely data driven, and he's kind of in some sense he's a lot of like he's a nerd's kind of like dream because he's managing a certain way that a lot of these people online, they like to analyze the game. They like to bring the numbers into it. And so a manager like that is very data driven. But I do also think we're also just talking about money in the sense, right? Like a lot of the Premier League teams have great managers because they have a lot of money to throw at these guys. And, I don't know if La Liga can necessarily compete with that. So you won't necessarily get those names who are kind of taking the Premier League by storm, and there's so many great managers doing so many different things. But at the surface of this question, I don't think La Liga is as behind as you think it is, and I just mean in general. I think behind the scenes they all use the data to an extent, and basically how it's kind of applied and implemented will vary based on the manager who's in charge at the time.
so many layers to this question. Kiyan, it's funny because what I was most interested in, and kind of the reason why I wanted to hear you jump on this question first, was to see how you approached it, because I got kind of lost in the question in itself. I think there's, like you said, it's kind of like an onion. You have one layer where they talk about the data aspect, and another layer where Spanish players don't, like, they produce great players but not athletes. So you get that whole debate, the innovation in La Liga, the old guard coming back, and then Spanish clubs in La Liga adapting to the changes of the new game, which the game is always evolving. So yes, adaptations have to be made, in all fronts, on all fronts, if they want to sort of keep up and stay up to date with the innovation of the game, which again, that happens in a kind of global sense, perhaps in certain areas quicker than in others, such as England, because of the financial backing. But so I was a little bit, perplexed as to how to take this one. So I'm happy you went on it first, because you brought up many points, some of which I didn't really take into account, like the more analytical aspect. I was more thinking about, I guess, the athletes versus players, and kind of how the game is shifting. Recently I did an interview with Ilaix Moriba of the Barça B team, and he's described as like a modern day player, and he's really he's for those that don't know him, he's originally from West Africa, Guinea, I think it was. I forget exactly where. Guinea-Bissau, that's what it was. Or was it Guinea? Fuck, I don't remember. No, Guinea. Guinea-Bissau is Ansu Fati. And anyway, he's been in Spain for a long time. He's played for the youth team in the Spanish ranks. It's pretty much expected that he will play for Spain, and that he's a massive prospect. And he's a very strong. He's called a young Pogba, and I think the comparisons are very valid. Even though I think, generally speaking, you want to kind of stay away from making direct comparisons, like, the case of Pedri and other players. But, he's tactically very gifted, and he's physically imposing, as in, not as imposing as Spanish forward. Well, I'm always blanking on names at the wrong time. Wolverhampton, come on, my friend.
Adama.
Thank you, Adama. But yeah, he is, very muscular and tall, and physically strong. So again, why is he being referred to as the modern player? Because I guess there's a tendency for also football to head into the direction where players are stronger, which is not the first time that we saw that. I mean, back in the 90s, in Italy, the Italian league was very strong. They looked for more physically imposing players, stronger players. Whereas, obviously, when, in particular, at the peak of tiki-taka, Barça, Spanish national side, eran los bajitos, right? It was all the small ones, the small players, the kind of the players that you'd never expect to have such a, I guess, successful and even long career. Your Xavis, Iniestas, your Messis, and David Silvas, etc. I can go on, Modric, Cazorla, etc. So, anyways, I went from thinking about one thing, then I started thinking about that, then I started thinking about the height of tiki-takas, because I think that was interlinked in the question somehow as well. How, I need to pull up the question now. How tiki-taka is kind of like part of the old guard, and
right,
and also there. I mean, I read a super fascinating article a little while back where they basically they took, again, the height of tiki-taka, which really was, in the 2009-2010 season, I think, at the height of the Pep Guardiola's team, when Spain won the World Cup as well. I think that was the Sextete. And how, the analytical part behind the success of that team, and trying to make sense of it, not just from a tactical but also number standpoint. And again, it just showed, the benefits, or when executed correctly, how the team that dominates possession, that is basically in control of their passes, that if they stay in a certain triangular formation with a certain required distance to allow the players a certain right amount of space to execute the most efficient passing accordingly, etc. Like there was this very meticulous study done by numbers where it just showed, even from an analytical point, just why it was successful and why how badly really other teams were dominated by this system and way of executing football. Even if the goals, and that was another thing, like the goal tally didn't necessarily show the dominance on the scoreboard. On the pitch itself, you could see that the team was very much under control. Now, so I kind of got lost into all that, and then the question finishes with regards to Spanish clubs and La Liga falling behind. So, Kiyan, I was lost in this one. I didn't really know how to take it.
It's not just one question. It's not just one question. Yeah. But I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, finish your thought. Yeah.
No, and I think when it comes, that's all cyclical. So I don't think necessarily that Spanish teams or that even football philosophies have fallen behind. I just think that Spanish football and clubs have been dominating for a long amount of time. It's been a very long period of time. One of the longest, I would say, successful periods of time since these professional football has been established, like in the late 1800s, 1900s. So if you look throughout history, like the dominance of say one particular, whether it's style or club or country of football, has not lasted more than over a decade. And it's been, again, cyclical. So there'll be returns. You're talking about your Spanish, German, English teams, etc. I think just and I'll finish with this, Kiyan, because otherwise, we're not going to have any time for the other questions. But that's exactly why I keep pressing, in this case, Barça, to not stray away from the philosophy and the reason for its biggest success and why it was, became the greatest football team ever assembled and one of the best teams in the world, recognized by everyone, really, whether you hate or love it. Because that could, I think that is still valid. I don't think we need to walk away from that concept and style of play, because with the right players, with the right coaches, with the right staff behind it, the upbringing from La Masia, again, we had the recipe of success. So I think that will come back. And again, as long as you don't lose your way too much and, kind of lose faith, I guess, in the system. And that's it. Kiyan.
Well, the tiki-taka aspect of this question is that, on one hand, I will say that, because the question states, one is the shift from tiki-taka to heavy metal pressing. And so I think that in itself, we don't need to create a false kind of dichotomy there, in that tiki-taka itself was heavy metal pressing. I mean, it was relentless. It was right, exactly. You hold the ball in the opposition's third, and as soon as you lose it, you press like maniacs. And you win it back. And so you mentioned kind of like maybe the domination aspect and the numbers behind that, but also there was a psychological aspect to it. And that, like, when you're just trying to, it's the equivalent of just getting stuck in the ocean, in the middle of the ocean, and you're treading water and there's waves hitting you and you don't know what to do. That's what it was like, the football equivalent of that when you were facing that. And that's why it was so hard to defend. I will say, like, I think it's the way that Barca team functioned. I don't think it's as easy as saying we should go back to that style, because I think the reason why that worked so incredibly well was that it was just the players and the manager and everything behind it was so perfect. And I just don't think that's really replicable with lesser players. Like, you kind of see, like, Guardiola himself has had to evolve, like, with City. Like, they don't play that way because you just don't have two of the greatest central midfielders of all time, plus one of the top two players of all time, plus a bunch of amazing technically gifted players around them and captains. And I think that worked. I think it's going to be very hard, Diego, to replicate that again. You can bring the style back, but I think if you don't have the players to execute it, I don't think you're going to be able to do it properly, which means you might have to evolve it to a different style of play.
But for me, the style is Frank Rijkaard's Ronaldinho. For me, the style is Luis Enrique's triplete. For me, the style is
But they didn't play that way.
Cruyff's dream team. But they did, though. I mean, the main concept of what they call Barça DNA. Let's not call it tiki taka then. If that you want to stray away from that because of the Spanish national team. For me, it's more about possession of the ball, passing, dominating your opponents by basically suffocating them every time that you lose possession, making sure that again you dominate the balls for as much as possible, for as long as possible, creating opportunities on goal, really outscoring your opponent. So yeah, definitely more of a focus on the offense, and as soon as you're losing the ball, your first defense is your first striker or first forward. And I think down the line of the ever since Johan Cruyff really instilled that philosophy, which you only have to. Everybody knows that Pep, let's say, is a disciple in that sense, and will always hail Johan Cruyff as his biggest influence when it comes to his footballing ideas, which really goes back to Rinus Michels, right? The football total. I mean, that is the style of play, which is not just executed, not necessarily executed in one form or fashion. Even in the first season of Ernesto Valverde, when we all had to conform ourselves with a much more pragmatic style of 4-4-2 formation, that first season in particular, you still had a sense, okay, well, look, Barca we're comfortable. We are still dominating possession. We are still, out creating chances and outscoring our opponents. It's a different formation. It's less glamorous than the 4-3-3 of Luis Enrique, certainly. But you could even argue that was still, let's say, a Barça DNA, a Cruyff style of play, because I think the main concept and elements of his teachings of football were present in that season. So. Yeah, that's the thing. That's why when people always talk about, there are no more Xavis, there are no more Iniestas, there are no more Messis, etc. And no, there aren't. But that's neither what was necessarily expected. It's more about not straying away from that type of thinking and start doing crazy stuff like we saw in the latter stages of Ernesto Valverde, or where basically it became a player-dominated dressing room at some point, where basically, they just did what they wanted, and it was all like, well, we are great, we'll score a goal. Things just got very sloppy. Let's say there was no discipline whatsoever when it came to the trainings, to what we saw out in the field, and
but that's all different from the style of play, obviously, and so like.
Yeah, but I think that has an influence, though. That has an impact on the team's performance.
I just don't think you can't replicate. You can go back to playing that way. I mean, but if you don't have the right players to do it, it kind of looks like what Barca looked like under Setien. I mean, I didn't think it. I mean, look, Setien's style of play was very, very much about it. Nobody took Cruyff's blueprint the way, as nobody loved it as much as he did, really. I mean, that's all he talked about, was constantly playing a certain way. With
Setien, the wrong settings for Setien to ever be successful at Barca, with that crop of players coming halfway through the season who were immediately against him because their favorite Ernesto Valverde left. That's why
this
season still.
That's why I think it's going to be. You can't replicate that. You just can't. You can't replicate what happened in 2009-10, that era, because there was too many.
You don't have to.
You don't have to, but you may not succeed replicating it if you're trying to replicate it. I just think you have to.
That's not what we're looking for. That's the point. You're not getting the point. We're not looking to replicate. We just want that idea to be there, and not to stray away from that. Not to go.
Yeah, but wouldn't you rather just win?
But that is what eventually will bring us, sustained long-term success, like this period of time has shown.
Maybe not. But
1992. Since 1992, Barca's outwon Real Madrid massively when you look in the grand total of titles won from La Liga, Copas del Rey, Champions League, created, tripletes, sextete, best team ever created in world football. It's been a more glamorous time ever since Johan Cruyff left. Again, I feel like I'm very kind of grandiose when I'm talking about his philosophy, but it is that. Your Frank Rijkaard, even though Frank Rijkaard didn't play the same way Pep Guardiola played, he left Pep with a whole lot of good players. And Frank Rijkaard was also a disciple himself of Johan Cruyff. He had him, in his corner. He was a mentor of his. Johan Cruyff had immense influence over the way that Frank Rijkaard executed his style of football.
I mean, I'd have to look at the titles to see who has won more titles since Johan Cruyff. I'll take your word for it.
We'll do that.
I take your word for it. I'm not disputing it. I'm not arguing it. I also think Real Madrid have had a million problems and have made millions of mistakes in the past 20, 30, like decades of mistakes. My favorite quote on football Twitter is also the one where they're like, Real Madrid had, I think, 10 Champions League titles or 9 Champions League titles, but then Barcelona came along with the greatest player ever and all these and the greatest coach ever and Xavi and Iniesta, and then Real Madrid had 13 Champions League titles and like this amount more Champions League titles than Barcelona. I think the point is, I think look, even Luis Enrique, he had to change it because his strengths were different. His strengths was that he had Neymar, Messi, and Suarez, where Pep's strengths was that he had brainiacs in midfield who could control, dictate, and organize everything. And so Luis Enrique, his way of playing...
Enrique still had Xavi and Iniesta as well, huh?
But not the same version. Not the same version. And not the same style of play either. I mean, a lot of the way Luis Enrique had it was to emphasize kind of how to get the ball to the wings so that Neymar could create. And again,
it was 4-3-3. It was a 4-3-3. You're 100% right. Where the emphasis, I would say, was getting the ball up the field faster. But the real concept of how the wingers worked, opening the space, opening the defensive lines, making sure the player gets the ball in free space, opening up free space for a player who wants to receive the ball. All those concepts were still there. But I agree that it was more of a fast pace. Where maybe with Guardiola, the emphasis was on, the rondos, the triangle, out passing, and kind of timing your passes more to look for that dagger pass. Whereas, the emphasis for Luis Enrique was a little bit more, vertical in that sense.
Yeah, I don't know if we can drag this discussion any further.
Well, that's the thing.
It's been a talking point for many years on this podcast.
It has. But yeah, and the thing is now, it's so easily to go in every which way direction with this question. And I felt like we now probably strayed away because I didn't want to make it about Barca, but I'm going to make it about Barca because that is my reference point, right? That is kind of my I'm gonna, if I see Tiki Taka being referenced and kind of again having to do with success, etc. Anyway, let's not drag this on. Kiyan, let's move to the next question. We got so many good questions. I don't want to make this all about teachings and Tiki Takas.
Let's take a question from Sly Manfi. He says, "What happened to Lemos? He really looked like a defender with huge promise and just faded out." When Las Palmas got relegated, why is it generally difficult? I'm not sure why you're laughing. Why is it generally difficult for young players to come back into the light when their teams get relegated and they don't earn promotion right back, or a team in this top division doesn't pick them up? What happened to Lemos?
I'm laughing because of that, because we couldn't have flipped the topic more 180 degrees than going from Cruyff's teachings.
That's the best way to transition. Just do it. Just flip the switch.
What the fuck happened with Lemos, by the way? Huh?
It's a great question.
What happened to that guy? Yeah,
I had
don't
forgot
know.
about his existence until I read this question today, and I was like, "Wow,
Exactly.
what did happen to Lemos? That guy was promising." I remember there were a couple of Real Madrid writers who were very much like, "We need to sign this guy to replace Ramos one day." I mean, the biggest thing about him was his free kicks. That's what I remembered with Las Palmas. On the ball, he was he was also error prone, but I don't know what happened to him. Las Palmas got relegated.
He's in Turkey, no?
Yeah, he's in Turkey. He played. Las Palmas got relegated. He played one season in Segunda, and then went on loan to Sassuolo, where he was purchased. So then he went there, but barely played, and now he's with Fenerbahce. He's only 25.
Wow. Well, there you go. There's Lemos.
All right. Bigel. Is that how you say it? Bigel. Bigl.
Bigel,
says,
yep. Big L, Big L.
But the
Big L, rest in peace.
I doubt
You
it's
don't wanna
Big
mess
L
with
when
this.
the L is lowercase. But thank you.
I know, well,
Big L
how I'm
says,
reading.
Bigel says, who is your second favorite team in La Liga?
Second favorite team in La Liga. Honestly, man, these kind of questions, I always feel like I disappoint maybe the listeners because I don't really have a second team, let alone in Liga. I have some sympathy, and it's probably badly translated as well from Spanish to English towards other teams. And I mentioned the fact that my grandfather was from Andalusia, from Cazorla actually, and he kind of was a half supporter of Sevilla, even though he became a massive culé. He immigrated here from down south when he was a young boy in the Navy. So. And then for me, it's ADO Den Haag, because I'm from Den Haag in Nederland, in Holland, and obviously Ajax have a soft spot for them, even though I never could admit that when I was a young boy in Den Haag, because it was kind of like selling out. It's kind of like not being from Madrid or Barcelona and supporting either team. I suppose you're kind of like, but you should be supporting the home side. So, but for me, it was always Barca. Like Den Haag was shit. Never had anything interesting going on. We were more famous for our hooligans, and me being half Spanish, Catalan, half Dutch in Den Haag, not being able to support Ajax. Even wanting to, it was like obviously for me the obvious option was Barca. So I've just always been Barca in La Liga Santander. Look, in the Smart Bank, I can give you, let me see, it was in Tenerife, right? And Tenerife.
That's random. Why?
No, Tenerife went because they allowed Johan Cruyff to have one of the most successful spells winning La Ligas, going from 91 to 94, and obviously them winning the 90, or I should say Madrid
that
losing
angle.
the 92,
Yes, that
93
angle.
Ligas.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
Against Tenerife, back to back.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me.
Tenerife, baby. Thank you. I love you guys.
Well, then in that case, for us, it's Espanyol and Tamudo. But I don't have a second favorite team either. I just don't. I don't, I always have, I will say this, every year, and this team changes every year, I will have a soft spot for somebody, but every year that soft spot will move on to a different, and it really just depends on how the rosters are constructed. So I don't really have that one this year, but last year it was Real Sociedad. The year before that, I also enjoyed Sevilla last year. I also, like in past years, it's been Alaves. There have been definitely times especially when Paco Gemes was there with Las Palmas, I just enjoyed watching them because they were so bad defensively, but so fun offensively too at times. On that note, Betis for a couple years were definitely, I had some soft spot for them. Growing up, I always liked River for some reason. Maybe it's because the players that went through River. Yeah. That's it. I don't know. I don't really have a soft spot for anybody now this year.
Soft spot.
Yeah.
Barca, say it. You want to say it, but you say it. Like, God damn, Barca.
Our patron Pratik Solim says, who are your top 4 in La Liga this season, who are the relegation candidates in La Liga? No particular order.
What? No, can I make a suggestion? No disrespect to our patron. And if you want to take a Kiyan, then we let's do it. But this is a question that we should push forward to when we do. It's midway to the season. We do our sort of season, midway of the season review. We hand out our awards.
Which, by the way, we should have done this week. That should be happening.
No.
When is that? When is the halfway mark?
Next week.
Next week? Okay. Next week is the halfway mark?
Pretty sure it's next week.
Okay, we'll do that next week. Okay. All right, Pratik. Well, I'm happy to bring it forward then.
All right.
Let's bring it forward. So next week we also got to do La Liga awards, just like mid-season awards, best team, best position.
Mid-season awards.
Yeah. Best positions. The wording on that came out wrong. But
now
I mean,
talking,
that's Patreon level, next level Patreon.
Yes.
Patreon. Omar Bari says, what would you consider Ronaldo's best season at Real Madrid and Messi's at Barcelona? This shouldn't be based purely on statistics. Also, not sure if discussed previously, but what your guys' opinion on Super League? Okay, let's do Ronaldo Messi peak. Have you thought about this?
Go. Of course. You do Ronaldo, I'll do Messi.
Well, that's
if you want to chime in,
I'd like to also. I'd like to have
of
Messi
course,
opinions.
You get such a soft spot for Messi and Barca. Of course, I'm sorry, Kiyan. I'm not gonna take it away from you. Okay.
I have always appreciated players later in their career more than I have in their peaks. And so for me, like with LeBron, the peak for me with LeBron, while everyone will say it's those high flying Miami days, probably a second year with Miami where he was a video game. To me, his peak was later, even though it's not his physical peak anymore. But what he did with Cleveland, beating the Warriors in the finals, was unbelievable to me. And just seeing that carry job was incredible. A lot of people will say, MJ, 91, 92, he was a freak, and he was. But to me, like the old wise Jordan of 96, where he just is so smart and intelligent. He's less explosive, but he's so systemic in the way he breaks you down. That, to me, is the peak. Luka Modric, I think some players would say, this mid-decade was his peak somewhere. I would say it was later in his career when he carried Croatia to the World Cup final. That to me was more impressive. I think with Messi and Ronaldo, it's kind of similar. So I think the peak of both, Diego, actually coincided in the 11-12 season when we're talking about their physical peaks, the peak of their powers, 11-12, which kind of make that 11-12 season extra special, right? I mean, if you're maybe telling a football fan from the future, from like 100 years from now, and they're like, hey, I've never seen football anymore before, what season should I go and watch? You'd probably go tell them to watch 11-12 because you get the two greatest players of all time at their peaks. But I think with both of them, with both Messi and Ronaldo, I would say some of the things they've done later in their careers are more impressive, and therefore, to me, I guess you can call it their mental peak, maybe not their physical peak, but they're still so strong physically that doesn't really. I even feel guilty labeling it that way. So, Messi, after Neymar left, to me, what he's done with Barca is more impressive than what he did, even when he scored that crazy, where he had 50 goals in the league in 11-12. Which, by the way, that's not the entirety of his goals. That's just his league goals. That's insane. And he had 73 goals that season. To me, what was maybe more impressive...
Go 1 year back, it was even higher. Right?
No. The 11-12 was his highest, 73 total.
Well, then there's no... No, the 2012 year... sorry, because I'm counting the year. Correct. Yeah, you're counting the season. But that year, 2012, it was 79 goals with Barca, 12 with Argentina.
Oh, okay. I didn't count that.
And he scored 91 goals in total. So that was the record that he set. Remember when he took over? What's his face? The German striker, something Müller.
Gerd Müller.
The record from 1972. Was it Gerd Müller? I forget. But anyway, he broke the record for most goals in one natural year for 91 total. That's the one you're referring to. But again, sorry. Because you referred to the season, whereas I was looking at the whole year. Yeah.
So I think I didn't count any of the stuff outside of Barca and the three competitions that they played in, the major ones. But I think with what he did after after Neymar left has been more impressive. I just think like Messi dependency went to a whole different level right after Neymar left, especially once Suarez started to decline a little bit. So to me, what he did in 18-19, I think may have been his most impressive, and he's still scoring like crazy. But the thing is, if you look at all of his numbers, he actually 18-19 season was some of his best chance creation numbers. Actually, like assists per 90, that was the best of his career that season. And also he's scoring an insane amount of goals. And goals plus assists, that was his third best of his career. I also think the eye test, and we can, this question says to kind of disregard stats for a second. I think you have to bring in stats at some point. We're talking about the player's peaks. I think that 18-19 season, nothing will touch what he did 11-12, but 18-19 was very impressive to me, and I think that can be considered his peak. And it's not just an eye test peak; like even the numbers can back up that may have been his peak. The only thing that he didn't have that as prolifically was goals, but he still scored 51 goals. With Ronaldo, I think of him in a similar light, in that I think with him, a lot of people will look at what he did on 11-12 and come away just blown away. And I think like somewhere between 2015 to 2017, that range was more impressive version of him for me, because he kind of he started to evolve his game a little bit. His movement
became a center forward, yeah.
He basically transitioned to a center forward, and just like his movement off the ball, I've never seen anything like that. Anyone like at will getting to his spots constantly over and over again, and putting the team on his back against Wolfsburg in that historic comeback and that historic hat-trick he scored. I think for Ronaldo, it's probably somewhere between 2015 and 2017, that 2-year range. And if I had to pick one, I'd probably go with 15-16. Even though that wasn't his numbers peak.
I was going to say, 'cause his numbers peak was just before, 13-14.
Yeah. I just think like, I'm always more impressed with what these guys do a little bit later in their careers. Because I just think like, it's like a more wiser version of them. And look, like, Ronaldo's, the goals he's scoring in Champions League finals, I think he's had 4 Champions League final goals, which in itself is remarkable. But just the goals he scored in the knockout phases, basically from 15 to 18, those 2 to 3 years, I think that's where his peak actually lies, even though it wasn't his physical peak from 2012.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Cristiano, I should say, Cristiano Ronaldo, but not to confuse, because first I thought he was asking about,
I actually thought Ronaldo. that was the question at first too, yeah.
Yeah. But, he's more measured when it comes with regards to the goals scored, where I think Messi's standards and peaks are maybe measured in other additional areas as well, perhaps more so than Ronaldo. So I find it very interesting, the aspect I guess you're considering of Messi when it comes to his peak. Although I do remember you kept reiterating after the Neymar years how according to you, we're experiencing Messi's peak at the moment. And I always find that kind of, I guess interesting to hear that coming from you, because I mean, from a number standpoint, as well as just sheer execution, drive as well, I felt that and kind of enjoyment that we saw from Messi coming out of his boots was definitely more during in those earlier years. Barca winning the sextete, that you're talking about, the years where he started winning his earlier Balones de Oro, really the rise of post Van Rijkaard, and obviously with the I think it culminated as well when he was put into that false 9 position, where that was really created in that historical, remarkable 6-2 thrashing of Real Madrid in the Bernabeu, and just that year in and of itself, it was the Copa del Rey that we won against Athletic, La Liga that will always be remembered for that 6-2 winning the Champions League against Manchester United, the first Spanish team to ever win a triplete at that time, then the Supercopa against Athletic as well, the Super Cup against Shakhtar, the Club World Cup. It all culminated, by Messi scoring that winning goal with the Barça crest, if you remember that, Kiyan. That beautiful memory, I'm sure, that we share of, again, a year that just capped the best year really in the history of football by the greatest team to have ever played the game. And for me, if when I'm asked about Messi's peak, and I'm going to revert more to those times, and a little bbit later as well, like in the 2012 season, when again he just went absolutely on a rampage, just scoring goals like we'd never seen before, to be slowly but surely evolving to a player that is just as generous in the delivery, assisting to his players and just making key dribbles, his XGs, and in all categories, man. It's just been an incredible ride that like any athlete, I think slowly but surely we're seeing the demise of it. Obviously this year more than ever. But I find it always very interesting, the fact that you kind of, I guess, appreciate it and take into account and value those latter years where you're right. I mean, the team did become much more heavily dependent on Messi's greatness and his output, his efficiency, and that burden of carrying that on his shoulders is taxing, I would imagine. There was a great interview that took place. I don't know if you heard about it, read about it on Spanish TV on La Sexta by Jordi Évole, who's a fantastic journalist. He always makes just fascinating reports. He has the best interviews, with world leaders, politicians, athletes, etc. And he's just a very endearing guy, but that also manages, that manages to basically get the interviewees at enough ease to fire off the right questions at the right time and switch topics kind of unexpectedly and make them also quite uncomfortable. And he was asking Messi, obviously, all the uncomfortable questions in the most friendly and kind of a comfortable way, I guess. And Messi didn't shy away from it. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think he's insinuating as well, at least that was my interpretation, that this really is, we're probably seeing the last season of Messi at Barca, at least him as a player. And he reiterated several times that he would love to come back to this club, that this is his home, not just Barca, but Barcelona. This is really where, ever since the age of 12, 13 years old, he obviously lived there and made the sacrifice to come here, and he's felt at home ever since. He made it his home for his family and for his extended family as well, for that matter. And as much as he is from Rosario, I think he will always come back here and have a place here. But we are seeing the end of Messi as a player. And for me, again, if the fact that we've experienced this demise as kind of prolonged as it's been and as impressive as Messi's performances have continued to be, when you talk to me about peak Messi, I will always, kind of look back with great nostalgia towards those years where he was just up and coming. And, in terms of Ronaldo, for me, I had, less of a romantic fucking story here or say feedback to the question. But for me, the 2013 season, I think from a number standpoint, really, if I can expand, I think ever since arriving to Real Madrid, so when was it, 2009, Kiyan, I think, when he came? Mm-hmm. Let's say 2009, 10 to 2014, 15. I think that's, for me, when we saw Ronaldo at his Cristiano, again, at his height. Of his physical peak, his peak, maybe ambition as well, the drive that he had to compete with Messi, to be recognized as also one of the best, and to prove himself against the juggernaut that was Barca at the time, and that is Messi. That for me was kind of peak Cristiano, seeing that battle take place.
By the way, this newfound love you have for him after he went to Juve, and you were talking all these good things about him. Yes. I saw a clip today that reminded me of that, where he talks about his relationship with Gerard Piqué. Did you see that?
What did he say? No, I didn't see
It was
that.
like that stupid award that they gave out recently.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It was like
God.
the greatest
I'm
player
happy
of the
you said
century.
stupid award. Yeah, right, exactly.
And he was on
Jesus
the
Christ.
podium, and they were, I don't know what the question was exactly, but PK's smiling in the audience, and Ronaldo was talking about, like,
He's there.
yeah, and Ronaldo was talking about, like, PK and I, obviously we have great friendship going back to when we played with each other in Manchester United, and then obviously naturally we fought a lot when I went to Real Madrid, but it's all part of the game. And I was like, oh, Diego would appreciate this moment.
I do. I appreciate the new Cristiano for sure.
Okay, how much time you got? 5 minutes?
Go, keep firing it right now. Family's not home yet, so we're good. Yeah.
Omar Bari says, oh, that's the question we just read. Prexina says, hello, Kiyan and Diego. A while back, Diego refused to accept Modric as one of the greatest midfielders. He thought Iniesta and Xavi were way ahead of him.
The goal.
Do you still feel the same, Diego? I personally think it's Xavi, Modric, then Iniesta. Perhaps you guys can bring some stats into this discussion. Would like to know if Diego still thinks the same. And I'll tie another question into this, or a statement from our patron. Jordan Frazao says, all Diego's going to do is drop the World Cup card and the discussion will be over. Modric is amazing, but Barca fans will forever hold that over his head as a reason why he will never be the best, regardless of winning the Ballon d'Or or not.
Okay. That and maybe the 32 other titles that he's won with Barca, the 5 other titles that he's won to Spain, the ridiculous list of individual trophies that he's won, of which the Ballon d'Or is not one, obviously. And you can judge for yourself for whether that was, the right, if that is doing justice by Iniesta or not. That's not the question. I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, compare those 32 to the 16 that Modric has won with Real Madrid and the 3 with Croatia. Any individual awards, which is not as extensive. Very impressive, but not as extensive as Andres Iniesta's. Again, Ballon d'Or aside. Look, man, Kiyan, we've been over this one. The Patreon that asked this question is, I'm assuming, the same one that asked it last time. My answer will be short and sweet. For me, it's Xavi Iniesta, the number 1 and 2. And, you can put Modric. I don't even know if I'll put Modric in third of all-time greatest midfielders. I don't know. Is this club bias? For me, that it's a silly comparison, and I know that recently Twitter kind of blew up, right? Because somebody put a tweet out saying Modric at what is he now, 35?
Yeah.
I forget. Well, Modric in his mid-30s is doing this at Real Madrid, and look where this guy is, Iniesta, in his mid-30s over in Japan.
And Xavi in Qatar.
We talked. Right, and Xavi and Qatar. Look, we talked about the evolution of the game. We talked as well, I think, about the quality of this current state of let's leave it at Real Madrid and Barca, which has significantly dropped in recent years compared to the other let's say the competition, especially around the continent, that Barca and Madrid are faced with these days. So for me to now use this kind of recency bias to state that Modric therefore has overtaken Iniesta as one of the greatest midfielders of all time, I think is absurd. I think you take their entire careers into account, their trajectory at their peak, as we talked about before. In the case of Cristiano and Messi, we look at the peaks of Iniesta and Modric, and for me, Iniesta by far wins that battle and outshines Modric. I'm not trying to disrespect Luka Modric, but for me, there's simply no discussion. If we want to talk about who is the third greatest midfielder of all time, then we, I can put Modric into that conversation. But for me, the 1-2 punch, the way that these two also combine, with each other, their chemistry, their understanding, their passing, their vision, their dribbles, add to that, a peak Messi as well. I mean, that's just it just culminated and combined for just an ecstasy and an explosion, orgasm of football, the standards of which Modric, I've never seen that come from his boots that consistently for that long of a period of time. So, Kiyan, that's all I'll say about that.
Well, I think everyone already knows where I stand on Modric versus Xavi versus Iniesta because we spent an entire podcast talking about. So I'm not going to add anything to this, but I was going to ask you, because here it says a while back Diego refused to accept Modric as one of the greatest midfielders. I was going to ask you if you actually believe that, but it seems like the way you answered it today, you're talking about like maybe third place and stuff. You do. Mm-hmm. That's not a true statement. You do believe he is one of the greatest midfielders.
There's no doubt. I mean, he's definitely the best Croatian I've ever seen.
Don't backhand don't add a backhand compliment. You don't have to say, oh well, he's just a little Croatian.
Hey, Croatia's No, I said right now, without having prepared for this next discussion, if you're comparing Modric and Iniesta, I'm going to take Iniesta. Why? Because there are 9 Ligas, there's the 4 Champions League, the 3 Mundiales de Clubes, the Copas del Rey, 6, everything. The World Cup, the Euro Cups, you go on and on and on. Even individually, again, permitting that he never won the Balón de Oro. I think you look at his individual achievements, they outshine and have outlasted Modric. But if we're going to talk about, best midfielders of all time, like what is your top 3? I can start including Modric into that conversation. And like I said, if we want to talk best Croatian of all time, which I think is a great and very interesting topic to be held, because from Suker to now Rakitic to Modric, etc.
No, that's not great. That's not, that part is not even close. It's not.
Well, I'm not trying to give a backhand comment by saying that. I respect Croatia enough, way too much, for historically what they've done in the world for the world of football to like dismiss that as saying like, of course he's the best Croatian of all time, which he is.
David Bayer says, "Do y'all recommend any good books to read?"
Wait a second. No, fuck that. Listen, you're totally.
I'm done with Modric, Xavi, Iniesta. I have like an hour of thoughts on this.
But just say it. Say it at least. What is it? Between Xavi and Iniesta, or Iniesta and Modric? No, you didn't. You said I've spoken about it in the past. I'm not.
Yeah, it's the same as always. To me it goes Xavi, Modric, and then Iniesta.
Oh, you put him above? Well, explain to me at least why you put him above Iniesta.
Am I gonna have to explain it to you next podcast too? Well, it's very simple to me. To me, no, Xavi is in his own discussion. To me, I think he is. I've never seen anyone dictate from his position an entire flow of offense and organize everything the way he did. He is, in the truest sense in the world of the word, an engine that if you take him out, everything falls apart. I don't think Spain wins the World Cups. I don't think Barca wins the amount of trophies they did without him, even with Messi and Iniesta there and Pep there and all of them. But with Modric versus Iniesta, to me it comes down to, well, like you listed a million Iniesta trophies. Like, let's not forget Iniesta was as great as he was, and at a fulcrum of those teams, everyone on that team won all those trophies. So I don't want to punish Modric for that.
He was MVP in finals, MVP in Euro Cup.
That's fine. I'm not going to take that away from them. I'm just saying I don't want to punish Modric for not being part of that. I'm not going to punish Modric for not being a part of Spain during that thing. I'm not going to punish Modric for not being a part of what Barca was, and for Real Madrid taking a long time to figure it out and winning 3 Champions League titles. 4 Champions League titles under his reign. So there's a different side of the coin too, that Iniesta has not accomplished what Modric has on a European scale. But I will say, if I had to choose between those two in a vacuum as to why I'm choosing Modric over Iniesta, it's because I've also never seen anyone cover as much ground as a midfielder as Modric has. So with Modric, I get defensive reliability, I get defensive security, I get help that he's going to be in every spot I absolutely need him to. I get creation. I get control. I get, at his peak, again, like somebody who can dictate a game single-handedly. And that's to me.
Iniesta here.
I just told you. I think to me, the one, and I've said this again, this is why I didn't want to get into this, Diego, because I also said in the other podcast that if you're to take Iniesta over Modric, I also have no complaints there. I have no problems with that. I think Iniesta is one of the greatest central midfielders of all time. I think there are people who take Iniesta over Zidane too, and I'm okay with that. I think I have no issue with Iniesta being ranked by you where he is. So I don't want to get into it. The reason I'm taking Modric over Iniesta is because, well, if I already have Xavi and I already have, assuming I'm pretty much covering that left wing spot with somebody else, like a Cristiano or Ronaldinho, then I'm taking Modric in my team because Modric gives me a nice balance, a nice two-way presence, a nice organization, a nice, you don't really take a hit offensively, but you also get so much security defensively too. And at his peak, Iniesta never covered the amount of ground that even Modric at the age of 35 did. So I just think Modric brings more to the table from a balance perspective.
Because his defensive capabilities already maybe started at a higher line. I don't know about that. I don't know. Look,
that's also true.
I want to hear you finish saying that the reason for your decision is effectively because Modric wears a Real Madrid shirt. And if you say that, I might even go so far as to say that I'll admit that is my reason for putting eventually the final one that tips the scale as to why I put Iniesta above Modric. If I were a Madridista, a Real Madrid supporter, maybe I would have, approached this debate from a different angle, and I would have tried to argue, the other side. So,
well, let me flip it back to you then. 'Cause no, that's not true. Because you know me. How many times this podcast have I been asked? Have I been asked to compare my favorite players of all time, including Raúl to Suarez, Zidane to Ronaldinho, and have I ever been biased about that? Have I? Answer.
That's why. No, you haven't. But you could certainly not have in your top two midfielders of all time, two culés, two Barcelonistas, the peak of
I don't give a shit about that. I
And
really don't. I
leading
don't
Madrid
care.
stuff.
I've never had fanboyism trickle into my analysis. Never. I don't care. Don't care.
Which is true. Which is why I love that you never shy away from the fact that you've got a soft spot for Barca. That is true.
I think you and I once.
Lurking inside
I think you and I once did all-time Barca 11 and all-time Real Madrid 11 once. We did that at some point, right?
You said that we would win.
And I just remember looking at that Barca team, no one's beating that team. Nobody's beating that team.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right.
Anyway.
Yes.
All right, and we'll bring this discussion forward next week when somebody asks us, and we'll pretend we never had this conversation before. So,
Right.
You missed a great switch flip I did. David Byer says, "Do y'all recommend any good books to read?"
Yes.
All right, hit us with your books.
Or what? Sorry. Go ahead.
He wants to know.
Should I jump on it?
Yeah, jump. Books.
Oh, okay. Books, man. Books is one of those things. It just haunts me. I feel like at high school again, when I used to pack my backpack with all of the books of all my classes as a kind of even though I'm not religious, I've been brought up Catholic. I think that's the Catholic inside of me, just kind of punishing, chastising myself by carrying the burden, the weight of books. I still feel that in this sense that I have books everywhere on my desk, next to my bed, where I work, then next to the couch. And I read and then I get distracted, especially nowadays. Really the books that I read now is the BFG, the Big Friendly Giant from Roald Dahl, the Chronicles of Narnia. So basically books that I read to my son, right? Which are fantastic. A lot of them I had already read since I was a kid. And the books I want to read now, the more, adult, say, or mature books, I just don't get a consistent amount of time. And maybe I'm not disciplined enough neither to read. I have maybe 5 or 6 books that I've half read or quarter read or 3/4 read. But they're all great. And whenever I get these kind of questions now, it's I feel bad because I can never give my full book review of the books I'm currently reading, but football books. I mean, I talked about the Johan Cruyff biography, right? That was very controversial. It's a thick pill, as they say in Dutch. It's 700-800 pages. So it's crazy. I mean, it is a very thick book with a lot of stories, sort of even his upbringing and whatnot, and it gets very personal as well. Like I said, it was a controversial book because it wasn't backed or supported by the Cruyff family, but other ones like come to mind, like Kiyan. I mean, if you ask me what is my favorite book of all time, two come to mind, and that is Papillon, which is a autobiographical novel written by Henri Charrière. It was published, the first time it was published, 1969. He's a French writer, was convicted as a murderer by the French courts, and this was basically, Papillon is a butterfly. And this is a memoir of his incarceration and subsequent escapes from the French penal system, actually a colony in French Guinea. That took place. It covers a period of 14 years between 1931 and 45. And again, why do I reference this book? It's just a great read. It's one of those stories that is hard to believe that is actually based on a real life story. It's inspiring. It's just marvelous. It reads like a Hollywood adventure movie kind of, and one that really kind of changed my life. It had a profound impact on me. It was a feel good. It was emotional. It's one where you tear up, but the guy is relentless and consistently escapes, breaks out of prison, travels around the Caribbean at some point as well, and trying to just do right by him, because he's actually wrongly convicted, I should say as well, of a murder in which he wasn't involved. So anyway, that is an absolute must. Papillon. There are more, but I'll leave it at that, not to drag this one on.
Great answer. A much better answer than I'll give. My list of books that I want to read is much longer right now than the list of the books on my bookshelf, unfortunately. But and also the way I read books is like, basically, I was going to Spain almost every weekend at some point before the pandemic, and I would literally read a book a week just because I would start to finish a book almost on the entire trip on the plane.
You a quick reader?
I can be a quick reader if I'm in the mood. Also, like on a plane, my options are basically watch the movies that are available, which are often nothing that is interesting to me because I've already seen them all. Or because the person next to me, it's hit or miss whether I'm going to talk to them or not. And the third option is really...
An awkward moment. And anticipation of seeing who's going to sit next to you on the long flight.
Sometimes it's great. I mean, you have great connections with places, but sometimes it's not. But
pre-COVID.
But because I never do work on a plane because you can't, because there's no Wi-Fi, and I've tried buying Wi-Fi before and it doesn't work anyway, so I stopped doing that years ago. But I just read, so I often get a good chunk of reading done. I haven't read in a while. Basically, I read a little bit. I tried, but it's just hard. I need to go back to traveling, but that's not an excuse. But I used to batch together all my book reading in traveling. But I will say, like, some of the ones that have really, because there are a lot of books that I've read that they're not life altering, but some of them leave a lasting impression on you. So the two that I'd say I've applied pretty well in my life have been, one is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Steve Covey. It's a really good one. I enjoy, looking at my bookshelf, I enjoy Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss because it's a compilation of all of his interviews and the people he's deemed successful, and he's interviewed them, and he's kind of written about the commonalities between them. Principles by Ray Dalio was very interesting, and it gets you thinking about kind of having to systematize your life, putting principles so you eliminate decision fatigue. Yeah, well, I'll leave it there. Nice. Questions from... I don't have much time because I want to upload this before this. There's a 2:00 game. I don't remember who's playing at 2:00, but I was going to watch it. I think it was Arsenal.
Yeah. Yeah. we still got a bunch of good questions. I'm gonna leave it up to you. Well, actually, my sort of fatherly duties are sort of reaching. Or
I
nearing,
can hear
I
it in
should
the
say,
background.
'cause
Yeah,
the family's home.
We're taping this.
But I say that.
Yeah, we're taping this, by the way,
No,
while Sevilla are playing Villarreal. So we missed that one.
Oh my god! Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
Right.
it's out the window.
No, I say that because I don't know if you want to put it forward to do justice, because there are some I prepared at length for all of these questions because they were so great. So I want to make sure to do justice by them all. But what all
right, well let's do this because we have Friday pod coming. Right. So let's do. We have 3 questions left over. We'll bring those forward to Friday's show. And
should we say which ones they are so for people to tune in, because we're not going to want to miss it.
So I won't read the whole questions, but I'll say the topic. So one is, what happens if Florentino is president of La Liga?
I like that one.
Barca elections update. And
of course, lots happening.
What collabs would we like to see between musicians and football players?
Yes, that's the one, man. That's the fucking that's the juicy part.
All right. Well, since you're excited about that one, we'll lead with that one on Friday.
All right.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, this was great.
All right.
I enjoyed it.
This was good, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we're back. Thank you guys for listening. Patreon.com/Churros y Tácticas if you want access to the other show. And we will be watching La Liga again. That tonight Barca plays. Who are you guys playing against tonight?
Yep.
Somebody. Somebody good?
Elche.
Oh, okay.
Was it Elche? I think it's Elche.
Maybe. Yeah. So Barca plays today, Real Madrid plays tomorrow, and we're back. So hope you guys are enjoying the holidays, and talk soon. Thanks, Diego. Take care.
Thanks, dude. You too. Peace.